Welcome to Leadership Rediscovered. I'm your host, Laura Siebold, and today I am very honored to be joined by Dr. David Hess, who is the new president and CEO of WVU Medicine United Hospital Center. Thank you for being here,
Thank
Dr.
you for having
Hess.
me, Laura. It's an honor and a pleasure. I've seen your video podcast in the past, and I'm very excited to be on.
Oh, well, thank you. Well, I'm going to go through your formal bio here.
Yes,
and
please.
then we have so much great material to talk about, so I'm excited to dive in.
Me too.
Thank you. Dr. David Hess has been a lifelong West Virginian. Aside from 4 years he spent in residency at the University of Kentucky in Lexington. He was born in the southern part of West Virginia and spent the majority of his life in Lumberport, West Virginia, being raised by an RN and a long-term loyal employee of United Hospital Center. He went to undergraduate and medical school at WVU. Woohoo, Mountaineers, and returned to Glendale, West Virginia after doing a combined residency in internal medicine and pediatrics. He opened a private primary care practice and quickly grew it to the largest primary care practice in the Ohio Valley with 5 employed providers. He practiced as a hospitalist at Reynolds Memorial Hospital for many years and ascended through the leadership ranks at the hospital. He was selected as CEO in December of 2014 and has overseen financial turnarounds at 3 WVU Medicine hospitals through growth, physician recruitment, and improvement in quality of care. Dr. Hess has very recently transitioned from his role as president and CEO of WVU Medicine Uniontown Hospital to his new role as president and CEO of WVU Medicine United Health Center in Bridgeport, West Virginia. David is married to his wife, Nicole, and is the father of 5 daughters and 1 son, ages 3 to 17. He is active in his church as well as helping coach most of his children's athletic teams. In his outside time of work, he enjoys music, the outdoors, and all of sports. And over the course of 7 years, he helped to raise over $250,000 in his band, Albuterol and the Inhalers. Love that. A band made up of healthcare professionals in the region. He has made it his mission to give back and reinvest in the state that gave him so much growing up. I would also like to mention that David is an alum of Lincoln High School. Go Cougars!
As many of our great West Virginians are.
Yes, absolutely. So again, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
I got to tell you, you're a singer, you're an interdisciplinary athletic coach, you're a business leader, and not to mention also a physician.
Yeah.
So quite a background. And I would just love for you to take us on your leadership journey.
Yeah, and I appreciate the opportunity to come on. You know, I think the bios are always very embarrassing. And but I think the reason that I wanted to make sure that the bio read that way was because at least when I grew up, you think about leaders and you think about entrepreneurs and you think about CEOs, right? And there's this perception in your mind when you're growing up in a small town in West Virginia.
Yes.
That's something that, you know, in our area, we would say, well, somebody in Pittsburgh would be that person, or somebody in Columbus, Ohio, or somebody in New York City, right? They don't think of a kid who grew up in a double-wide trailer in Lumberport, a town of 1,000 people, could grow up and become a fairly successful leader, which hopefully I've been able to do that. And you know, when I go back and talk to some of the schools that I went to, the message in the bio is not a brag fest or a humble brag. The message in the bio is, listen, if I can do it, anybody can.
Yeah.
Right? I didn't come up with a ward cleaver kind of family.
Yep.
You know, my parents were divorced. My mother raised me. And basically, as a solo parent, she was a registered nurse at United Hospital Center for many years, is truly my hero. But the reason for the bio is that, you know, I didn't come up with, you know, my dad was the CEO or my dad owned a company or, you know, my mother's family had money, you know, so there's not a stereotypical way to get into leadership.
Yeah.
And certainly if I can do it, anybody can do it because, you know, I didn't grow up with everything being perfect and all the opportunities afforded to me.
Handed to you
Correct.
on a silver platter.
Correct. So the message through the bio really was about, you know, the opportunities are there for anybody, whether your family has connections or can open doors or network for you or not. Because really I had to knock on a lot of the doors myself, and it was just through the grind that we always talk about in business and leadership that, you know, I just kind of out hustled a lot of people.
Yeah.
And, you know, that's just, the part of, I think, the beauty of what true West Virginians are all about is that we just kind of work hard. We put our heads down and grind, and we come up and look around and see what we've accomplished, and then we go back down again. But truly had a great upbringing, and always had that tug to leadership, whether it was through things throughout school, opportunities through school, whether it was student council or student body president, those kind of things. And I was president of my medical school class, and I've just always been drawn to leadership, and any opportunity that I could get to improve myself and take classes or courses to be a better leader, I did it. I think that some people are born with a little bit of that ability to influence people, and people are drawn to them and look to them for some leadership. And so for those reasons, you kind of have that nudge from other people, like, hey, you should do this, you should do this. But also there's that internal motivation that I felt like I've always had to try to do more and affect more and influence more. And really it's about giving back to the state that, was amazing for me growing up.
Yeah.
The area was, if I didn't have enough money at the store, somebody would pay for it and see my mom the next day and get the money from her. And, I was blessed with so many loving and caring and compassionate people around me that, now I just want to give back to those folks who did such an amazing job with me growing up.
It's amazing. And as a Harrison County resident, I am very excited about you coming back to Harrison County. And I want to dive into that in a minute here. But I need you to fact check me. I read an article, which I think this is your statement, so check me here on this. But it said, I started my undergraduate work as an economics major. However, once in college, I began to miss science. I wanted to understand the shy. Did you write that? Does that sound familiar?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
I'm curious about what you meant by I wanted to understand the shy, and if you could walk through, because you do have a really interesting educational background too, with the combination of the business and the science. So I would just love for you to share a little bit more on that, if you don't mind.
So, again, another message for folks, and again, I've got teenage daughters, and they always look to me and say, how do you know what you wanted to do? It's so hard for people to pick what they want to do in a career. And obviously, just like many of your other guests have said, you can be a leader no matter what you do.
Absolutely.
But, for career choices, some of us have kids, some of us have friends that they want your advice. How did you get to where you are? What should I tell my daughters to do? And really the message from my background is, a lot of times you don't know when you start college or when you start first in that career. And my background in education is really about the pivot. And I know a lot of your leaders have been able to do it in their businesses, or a lot of entrepreneurs have to do it in their business. Sometimes you got to pivot. And if it doesn't feel right in here, you got to make the pivot. So, what was missing was, so I started out in business. I loved economics and business and the leadership of that. But really it was missing that, it was missing the scientific process and the analysis and making A plus B equals C and watching the kind of the reaction and the science behind that. So I was missing that portion of the intellectual side of science.
Okay.
But also the people that you're around as well. So when I started doing a little more science classes, really we all go through this. Our emotional garbage bags are more full and more empty, and you go through ups and downs, and sometimes you have to surround yourself with people that motivate you and push you, whether that's through competitiveness or they inspire you to do better or wow, that person, really came from a different background. And if they're able to succeed in chemistry or organic chemistry, I should be able to do that.
Yeah.
So, surrounding yourself with people that continue to motivate you and inspire you. And so I got into the science classes. I was like, wow, these are my people here. They're grinding hard. They're asking, they're questioning everything. And so I found myself gravitate towards that. But I also had this pull over here in economics to want to continue that. Mm-hmm. So I just decided, okay, I'm going to major in both. And I don't know if this is true. Maybe I could ask President Gee, but I may have been the only person to double major in chemistry and economics at WVU. Maybe there are other people out there that watch this.
Might be.
that would challenge me on that. But I can tell you that nobody that I knew was doing a double major in both. And
wow.
And it's so important because, the economics, the finance, the leadership piece, that touches every job and everything we do. And I was so blessed that I had the foresight back then to just continue all those classes and understand how this touches every part of my life personally, but also every part of any career and every job you take.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's interesting too, because I love that you didn't approach this situation or this decision as I have to do this or this. Mm-hmm. You really did a nice job of the and, right. Instead of the or. And I think that's such a good lesson for anyone, children, or even once people are in their careers, of you don't necessarily just have to abandon that one thing and move only into something else. You can find a way to continue to do both.
I love that. That's such a great lesson. And I think that for many of us, they think it's just an absolute decision mm-hmm. of, black or white, mm-hmm. and there's no way to do both to make gray at the end.
Yeah.
And I think that I've done that through my whole life. In the bio, it mentions, my selection in my medical specialty.
Yeah.
And I remember that it seemed like I loved both of my rotations going through medical school, to be able to take care of adults, to be able to take care of kids. And, I met a person in training that said, hey, I did both. There's a double residency in adults and kids. And I thought, wow, it was the light switch moment that I said, I can do both. Okay, I'm going to do both.
Yeah.
So it took me a year longer than if I'd have did each of them individually, but it was so worth it because it gave me that perspective.
Yeah.
Of being able to take care of somebody truly from cradle to grave. Again, for this show, the message is, don't sell yourself short.
Right.
If there's a way to do both, if there's a way to encompass your passion in with what you feel like, would be more of my career, do them both. Weave both of them together so that at the end of the day, I'm incredibly happy because I didn't have any regrets and look back and say,
yes,
boy, I wish I'd have kept economics up, or boy, I wish I'd have done chemistry, and I was scared because I couldn't think of doing both of them. So I did for my elective credits in chemistry were my economics classes. So I was able to work it out, but that is a great message, is to not sell yourself short and to just do as much as you can without giving up something.
Yeah. Well, and I think speaking of doing both, you can see in your career that you've maintained both of those, even from the very beginning with the business and the science. And you've actually started businesses over your career, including in-care physicians. Would you talk a little bit more about that and what that experience was like?
So a lot about leadership is solving problems. Mm-hmm. Whether it's an entrepreneur who starts his own business and finds that there's a problem and they want to be the solution for. So in-care physicians, I would run into hospital CEOs or hospitals that say it's very, very difficult for us to recruit physicians to take care of people in the hospital and to staff it and to be able to talk to physicians because, again, physicians are made a little bit differently. And then just the schooling that we go through, when we come out the other side, we have a perspective that's different. We have a way to look at things that are different. So it is a little bit of a different conversation with physicians to get them to recruit and come on board with you. So, I offered a company that was kind of a start to finish solution for hospital CEOs to basically outsource that piece, to say, you know what, it's very difficult to recruit these physicians. It's very difficult to have these conversations with them because I'm a true administrator. I'm not clinical. I don't know what's important.
Don't speak
to
that
them.
language.
Correct.
Yeah.
So I opened InCare as a solution for those hospitals to say, okay, I get it. It's difficult. Throw it to me and I'll do it from start to finish. And honestly, that's the route that my career was heading. I saw a need for that. I saw more and more hospitals wanting that. And then truly you have that moment in your career where you have that decision point of, yes, I can be very successful depending on what you call success.
Sure.
I can be successful going down this path. But in the end of 2014, as you mentioned, a hospital that was near and dear to me, that was my first hospital that I started working at. Their CEO did not get his contract renewed, and somebody asked me to throw my hat in the ring because they saw some of the success in my private practice. They saw the success in this hospitalist company, InCare Physicians, and they said, would you consider doing this? And then you looked at the 300 or 400 people that work for this small hospital, and you knew that you could do right by them, and you knew that they needed you in that time because they were financially struggling, and that was one where you put the Dave Hess career path, you set it aside and you say, time out, these people need me and I'm going to stop. And again, I think great lesson for leaders in their career is that, you can be climbing up the ladder as fast as you want to. Sometimes there's points where just to really for your purpose, you have to stop and you have to pause for a second and you have to either pull other people along or you have to wait for them to catch up with you. And I think that was a moment where I'm so glad that I did it because it opened up so many other opportunities in my life to really impact people and to truly lead people.
Yeah, well, but how interesting, because I think you were chasing after a need. You were on a path where you were trying to solve a problem, fix a need, and then someone came knocking on the door and said, oh, but there's this other need, this other problem here. And you had that probably very difficult decision.
Very difficult.
Did you end up just closing that business down? Or
I did.
Okay.
I did.
So that was a big change.
It was a huge change. And again, I was very proud of it. It was very successful. But in the end, I think the heartstrings got tugged on a little bit, and I felt like, when I laid my head down at night and was happy with the work I'd done that day, would it be just building something for the sake of building it and truly meeting a need for hospitals, or was it the community that I lived and served in West Virginia and their families that depended on their jobs at the hospital. And it was a difficult decision, but, looking back, sometimes when you feel something tugging on you, it's probably the right decision. So I think, at the end of the day, just knowing that I was able to help those people, in that hospital now, I've left it now, it's been about a year and a half. It is a thriving hospital.
That's awesome.
It has doubled in size in employee count. Very pleased that hospital, the average salary had increased by $6 or $7 an hour.
Wow.
Because again, as we grew and we became profitable, we reinvested in the people.
Yeah, that's amazing.
So, and then guess what? They caught fire. And they were like, wow, you get it. Okay, we're going to work harder for you. And guess what? Then we became more profitable.
Yeah.
And then we reinvested in the people again.
Yes.
And again, it's leadership and it's just the business acumen of the first thing you always have to do is take care of your employees. And then good things will come of that. And it has. It's been, President Gee loves the story of WVU Medicine Reynolds because we took a small town hospital that was probably going to close without WVU Medicine coming in. And really, when WVU Medicine goes in, we reinvigorate a hospital, but we reinvigorate the community with it. So it's fun to do. It's fun to watch. And it truly goes back to when you reinvest in your people, they will take care of you.
Yeah. And, something that I have noticed, though, on the flip side of that, and I'd really like to hear your perspective on this, is oftentimes when an organization is struggling, they pull back on the investment. So, and you've been in organizations maybe that weren't, financially viable for long. How did you approach that and balance that?
It's a very tough balance. And again, your initial knee jerk is, you look at your home finances, right? When you start spending too much, you're like, maybe I better not go out to eat tonight. And you start pulling back. Right. And so you really have to trust yourself. You have to trust your instincts. So for, it may be an oversimplification, but you can either cut your way out of financial problems or you can grow your way out of it. And I've always been a grower. I've always been a seize the opportunity. Is there a new market we can go into? Is there a new opportunity to grow market share in different places? Is there a new service line that we're not doing that we should be able to do because the community is wanting you to do that? So honestly, I trust my instinct. I saw that there was a need. That hospital was giving away a lot of business that we could have been keeping at the hospital because we had a very kind, compassionate group of people, and people were wanting to choose our hospital. But we weren't offering certain services. So we actually ended up growing service lines and growing into orthopedics, and we grew into cancer, and we grew into women's and children's services. But there were many nights where I was scared that did I do the right thing? And I know you've asked other folks on this show what keeps you up at night. Yeah, boy, those were the decisions that kept me up at night. Should I have cut instead of growing out of problems? And I'm a very collaborative leader, so I took a lot of input from my senior leadership team. Great. What are you hearing out in the community? What are you hearing from the employees? And the employees had full trust in us because, again, the initial gains that we made, instead of building on new towers or painting somewhere, we invested back in the people. That's amazing. We said, look, you give us a little extra, we're going to put it right back into your salary, and we're going to give you better benefits. We're going to give you better health insurance. And I think for that reason, they ended up giving us more effort. And but it was so difficult because the knee jerk initially is, let's clinch tighter, let's hold on to the checkbook a little bit, and it is tough.
And I see that so often. That does seem to be the default go-to option, but you can only cut so much. Right. At some point, to me, that's not a sustainable strategy.
You're absolutely right.
And I like to think about it as losing weight, right? Calories in versus calories out. Right. I'd much rather just do more calories out and eat what I want to, or do a little more on that end, because you can only cut so much.
You're exactly right.
But that does seem to be that kind of default option. So I think that's a huge lesson to other leaders, other business owners out there to say, wait a second, again, there's not only one option. You can figure out a way to invest in your people. And maybe it is a conversation about, hey, everyone, I think the fact that you are collaborative and that you were talking to people and I would assume probably pretty transparent about what was going on. Yeah, being able to say, here's where we're at, here's where we're trying to go, need your help getting there. But, oh, by the way, when we get there's something in it for you too.
Were you in on the meetings? Because that was the exact.
Is that how you did it?
That was the exact message.
Oh, yeah.
The financials were never kind of an open book to the employees. We made them an open book. We walked them through the process and our logic. And, I tell everybody that starts with any of my businesses and companies that, congratulations, you're now part of the marketing team as well. Yeah. Because especially at hospitals, the first thing we do is we ask a nurse that works there, or we ask somebody who works in the operating room, who's the best surgeon at a hospital. So, when you are fully transparent and you let people know that, from this day forward, we're only hiring and recruiting A-player physicians and people that we would go to ourselves, so that when you go out into the community, you let everybody know that these are truly the best people that you can go to. But we want you to be our marketing folks. Again, I was very transparent in the timeline and what was going to happen when. But you say, look, we get to this point, we're going to reinvest in you again. When budget season comes up next year, we're going to put it right back into you, because again, you're going out and you're telling your friends, you need to see Dr. So-and-so. He's such a great physician. So again, you're absolutely right. It was being very transparent, and it was over communicating the situation. And that scared a lot of people. Quite honestly, it's, oh my gosh, are we going to lose people because we're going through financial issues? And
should we tell them that? They're going to get nervous.
Right. Yeah. How honest should we be? And again, I think always being honest is the right answer.
Yeah.
Because, the way you communicate it, and I think being an inspirational leader and being transparent at the same time, they can understand that we had full confidence in our plan, in our strategic plan and vision. And they could see that, and they say, okay, it's going to be tight for a while. We're gonna count the paper clips for a while that we're using, and but at the same time, I believe in you, and I know we're going to get there. And I think that they appreciated the honesty,
absolutely.
So that when people outside of the organization said, "Well, I heard you guys are going through some financial trouble. You want to come over and work for me?" They say, no. They've been very honest that the next 6 months are going to be tough, but then we're going to start turning the corner. We've got all these new contracts coming on. And then when they started seeing those things happen, they said, wow, we have a leader who's very transparent and is very honest with us. And what they say they're going to do, they're doing. And what they say is going to happen is starting to happen. And then it really, everybody bought in then.
Right. And you followed through too, which is a huge part of that. It wasn't just empty promises.
Right.
But I do think a lot of times why people leave when there is a financial difficulty or any kind of struggle in an organization is the fear of the unknown.
Right.
And if you can take some of that off the table and say, listen, we understand, that this is possibly concerning for you, open the books, here's where it's, and you're also teaching people more about the business.
Absolutely.
And how to take more ownership over the business too, which I think is huge.
It's a great opportunity to do that.
Yeah.
Because again, some of the conversations centered around, because everybody would ask, okay, are you cutting my part of the company? Are you cutting my division? And I say, look, the total corporation's losing money. We can't have all these lost leaders. Everybody said, well, I'm a lost leader. Well, you can't have too many lost. Yeah. Not everybody can be a lost leader. Somebody's got to be making money.
Yeah.
But, I took that opportunity to say, help me understand. Okay, let's say you're a lost leader. How can we minimize the subsidy?
Sure.
Okay, I get it. You're right. Maybe the emergency room or maybe a part of this company, it has to be a lost leader. I totally get it. But how can we minimize the amount of subsidy? Help me walk through what you're seeing as opportunities for us to save on expenses or grow a little bit more revenue within your division, not expecting you to turn a profit. Not everything can be a profit center. And sometimes there are lost leaders, but help me understand how to minimize a subsidy to your department. And they say, well, I'm glad you asked. Did you know that we're overpaying and doing this? And it did bring up some great conversations. And I had a contest early on that was called the 3I Award, capital I. And it was ideas, innovations, and improvements. So,
ideas, innovations, improvements.
Yeah. So,
that.
What ideas do you have that haven't been acted on? And we'd have a little contest. What innovative thing could you recommend for the company, or what are we doing now that we could improve upon? And it really, more than anything, I wanted to be very transparent that I wasn't a leader who was going to come in and I've got all the answers and I don't need anybody else's help. I think, I always say, your department, you're on the front lines, it better than I do.
Sure.
So please help me understand how we can make it better. But I think it sent the message that, I'm not some omnipotent person that feels like they know it all and knows the answer for every question here. I think it engaged people and it got buy-in from them to say, wow, this guy gets it. I do know that, we could do this or that and change things and really make it better. So it was very engaging to the folks. And, and we had it written down and they would submit it to me and I would literally read them all. And I would say 50% of them started out with, I'm glad somebody finally asked.
Yes.
And you're like, geez, that just tells you enough right there that nobody's asking frontline staff, how can we make things better? And I think that's very important.
And they so often have the answers and they are just waiting. I think a lot of times leaders will say, well, if they have the answer, why didn't they just say something?
Right.
And they're waiting to be asked. And all they want is to be able to share. And even sometimes you can really rally people around a challenge, even if it is a difficulty, by saying, you were talking about how you wanted to be around people that were competitive and pushing you and, challenging you. To be able to be a part of, help us fix this is massive in terms of engagement.
No, and even if it's for, bad things, that sense of, hey, we're all in this together. We're going to fix it together.
Yeah.
It just builds a esprit de corps and the camaraderie. And then when you're on the other side of it, what we see now, and like I said, I've had 3 financially kind of distressed hospitals that we went and fixed up. The amount of pride, knowing that, hey, we took this the plane was kind of going down a little bit, and we not only kind of pulled it and stabilized it, but we got it going this way. Yeah. It's unbelievable because, again, you go back to transparency. If they didn't know how bad things were at the beginning, they couldn't experience the joy that we have now with it being so good. If I was never an open book to the financials and say, hey, this is going to be tough, but we can do it. I have I wouldn't be here. Like, I wouldn't take a job that I thought I was going to fail at. Yeah. But now the pride and the joy, and they want to tell their story to other hospitals. Yeah. If they wouldn't have been at the bottom, they wouldn't have appreciated the top as much.
Can I ask you a very tactical question? Yes. Because given your background, you are someone who would understand the financials better than typically someone in a healthcare field, just because it's not part of their training and education. So when you talk about opening the books, and how did you communicate that in such a way that someone maybe with a non-business background would understand
That's an incredible question. So here's what we had to do. We had people, when we started opening up the leaderships, and I've heard your other leaders on here, and it's so true. It's every industry that, one of our lab employees that have been there for 30 years, guess what? We make you manager and a leader in the lab because you've been there the longest. What we forget, though, is that the way every business is going, we're having Sally or Jim in the lab more accountable to their budget, to their employee counts, their expenses, and they don't realize that Sally or Jim may not have had any financial background training at all. They only know their personal budget at home, and some of them don't even have a personal budget at home. So you're absolutely right. Before you have somebody run, you've got to, and again, this goes back to that, you got to pause for a second. Now, I felt the urgency when the financials weren't good. But in order to have the 400 or 500 people helping you out, I had to pause again, and that's hard for me to pause, but you have to pause again, and you have to start from square one with their financial education. And we had our CFO sit down almost one-on-one with many of our leaders. And say, okay, this is revenue, this is expense. And every time you sign a contract with an outside company, they send us a bill every month for $5,000, and we've got to pay that, and that's in your department. And they're like, wait, I just thought it was a bill to the hospital. I didn't know that, and it's nothing against them.
They just never had it explained to them.
They never had it explained, and they're wonderful people because you're right. They take ownership now. They attack those problems within their department almost like it's personal. Like this is their goal. Their goal is to provide a great product, but to keep the expenses down. And so it went back to education because you're right. I think that we're missing the boat if we don't pause for a second and make sure we're all level set and on the same page and can understand some of the terminology and the lingo that we're using about revenues and expenses and bottom lines, and that doesn't mean the same to everybody. So we really had to do education. So we did leadership meetings, and in the first few minutes of those, we really just had some like financial education 101.
Oh, that's great.
So, and then we presented the financials. And then we talked through them, and we, me and the CFO would kick it back and forth and make sure that if I said something that was more kind of lingo, I says, everybody understand what that means and what we mean by FTE? And they're like, no, what does that mean? And they were very honest, and you say, okay, that's full-time equivalent, and you really walk them through it. But it also is very eye-opening that these are some of our leaders in the hospital, and they're very, very good at their department, at respiratory therapy, at x-ray, but they don't know the financial part of it. So we can't push that on them to own it until they understand.
And can't assume that they know it either because that's just not a part of the training. Well, something else, speaking of part of the training, from my perspective, I can't imagine that through your medical training, there was a lot around how to be a leader, and you got the business part, which was great, but how did you learn how to lead people? How did you kind of craft your own leadership style?
So I think like many of the other guests on here, it all goes back to, I think one of the, either you're drawn to it because it's internal in the medical field, or you become that by going into the medical field. It's just this lifelong passion for learning. And I know that a lot of great leaders that I've interacted with are constantly learning and reading and watching podcasts and reading leadership books, and it is, it's refreshing for me to be in a field where it was very easy because I'm surrounded by people that are constantly wanting to learn.
Yeah.
So what would happen is, instead of reading 10 of the most recent journal articles on, pneumonia, I would read 5 of them, but then you'd also read leadership.
Wow.
So it was just about constantly reading on leadership. And I think there's a little bit of that inside of us that draws us to want to be leaders. But that doesn't mean that somebody that hasn't had that their whole life, I don't think they can definitely become leaders.
Right.
I mean, we're all leaders, whether we know it or not. It's a different story.
Or they're actually demonstrating it or not, but we are, you're right.
No, absolutely. And so, for me, it was that yearning, and then you just start, just like in medical school, you just take everything in about leadership that you can. So you read, and you listen to the popular leader gurus, and you make sure that you're constantly making yourself better every day, and waking up and saying, my goal for today is to be a better version of myself than yesterday. And sometimes that's reading some medical, literature, because I'm still practicing as a physician. But most of the time, it's about leadership, quite honestly. And you try to stay up to date on what other healthcare leaders are doing, but just general leadership folks and what they're focusing on now.
That's amazing, though, because I think what a decision that you made to carve out some of that time, instead of, like you said, reading the 10 journals or articles, maybe saying, hey, I'm not going to completely, again, abandon that piece of it, but I need to make time and space for this as well.
And you do have to be intentional with it.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, it's hard because, again, you get excited about something and then you want to jump all into it, and you think, okay, now I've got to pause. I've got to make sure. and really, during COVID, it taught me to be very intentional too. So, during COVID, that was top of mind for everybody, because literally, as a leader, you're trying to get through that day.
Yeah.
And but you also had to be strategic in your business. So, it was one of those things that when you have a big crisis that pops up in your organization or on your team, I had to be very intentional that 75% of my day I dedicated to handling COVID and COVID issues and what were we going to do about visitation and how much staffing did we have. But I always carved out 25% of my time to still work on the strategy for the organization.
Wow.
So, and literally within my calendar, carved out 25% of my time to make sure that I still met with community physicians that wanted to join our organization or opportunities to grow, expand. So it is when you love doing everything, I am self-aware enough to know that I have to guard a little bit of that, because I have to carve out the important things. And literally I've got great admins that help me do this. It's that carve out some of that time to make sure that I don't get so laser beam focused in COVID that all my meetings all day long are about COVID. It's, hey, give me my last 4 meetings of the day and block it off for strategy.
Well, and I think that's one of the hardest parts about being a leader, is trying to figure out how to do the strategic and the tactical day-to-day stuff. And I could see where, again, given your role, given what was going on with COVID, how easy it would be for you to just go into full firefighter mode every day and just be tactical.
It is. And again, you've been in businesses. I know you have a terrific background as well that I'm very envious of. I almost was heading to a former company of yours with my chemistry background. That was one of my backup plans. So, I think it's easy for us to go into a reactionary mode, right? So I love to have an open door policy, because I never want people to think that I'm not approachable. And with that, though, a lot of times they come in and they're like, and they drop it on your plate, and you got to fix it right then. And then what happens is you're right. So then that meeting runs over and you're in the next meeting thinking about the last thing that somebody dropped onto your plate. And then what would happen is at the end of the day, and with COVID, I felt like I was getting punched in the head from all different directions. So we were at the end of the day and all of a sudden I'm like, oh my goodness, I really wanted to go meet this key new physician in the area to see if there's an opportunity to partner on something, and I didn't get to. So, I think being very intentional about your schedule is important. And, just even your daily schedule as far as, trying to work in exercise or meditation or whatever it is to keep your, self mentally healthy. But for me, the business part of the day, and I like your show because it seems very practical. And I do want to give some practical pointers. Maybe it helps somebody, maybe it doesn't.
You're giving them, and I'm going to keep asking you to give them.
For me, it was literally, putting in my calendar and my schedule during the day. It was, intentionally blocking off things to make sure that, I had enough time to think about it and I couldn't bleed anything that was very reactionary and very, I need to get this done today and not let it bleed into the strategic part.
Yeah, and it sounds like you probably had to have some pretty clear boundaries too.
Yeah, very
because
clear.
First of all, great suggestion on actually calendaring things because I think that's a lot of times people don't do that, and that's a great first step. But then some people have it on their calendar and that's just time for me to think about the future, and I can't do that today. I'll go do this other thing. So I would assume you had to set some pretty clear boundaries for yourself and probably admins as well around that.
So the motto was, if it was life or death, obviously it could come into there, or if the building was burning down, or I say that in jest, but that set the tone for this has to be extremely, extremely important to bump into our strategic part of the day, where we constantly need to be, because we knew there was going to be life after COVID, and we knew for any business that struggled through COVID, there was going to be life at the end of this. I know some businesses really, really struggled with COVID. But for us, it was staffing, it was morale, and you had to spend a lot of your time on that to make sure you were picking everybody up. And I know you and I had a side conversation that, most of the time during the day, I feel like I'm the chief operating cheerleader. We're going around and you're picking up morale and you're letting everybody know that you appreciate what they're doing. And that was very important to do that through COVID, but I also knew that there was going to be life after COVID. And in any business, in any leadership role you're in, whether, no matter what that immediate problem is, there's going to be a time after that problem that you're going to have to deal with. And if you just go into this, bury your head in the sand mode, you're not going to have anything on the other side to deal with and work with. So
true. You're not going to have a business anymore to run, so you won't have to worry about it.
Absolutely. Or customers or patients or whatever it is. So, it's hard. Because, you want to be that leader that's responsive. You want to be that leader that helps people and they say, I can go to this person for that. But, but if you don't block off some of that time to be strategic, you're not going to be a good leader long term.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so true. Well, one thing I was curious about, we're in an interesting time now where you're starting to hear a lot more about burnout across industries from COVID, but in healthcare in particular, I can't even imagine with, essential workers and like you said, the staffing shortages, but just the very nature of what healthcare workers have been through for the past few years. Any tips, strategy, suggestions on how to start approaching kind of where we are in this journey, and especially as it relates to the well-being of employees and, things that we can maybe do to help get to a better place with that?
Yeah, so great question. We talk about this almost daily in healthcare. And I liken the situation to really what Army medics have gone through. When you go into healthcare, there's an assumption that you're going to be around some death and dying. It just happens, and we understand that. What we saw during COVID, though, were, at the hospitals where I was leading and running, you would have 3 or 4 people an hour die on the same nurse. Wow. And again, so what we saw on the other side of that was almost a PTSD kind of feel.
That would make sense,
And this emotional trauma that happened. So I was interviewed a couple of times, and I was most concerned about that for our long term. And now here we are. You're absolutely right. And that was me being strategic during that day and thinking about what are we going to have to deal with after COVID.
Yeah.
I know we have to staff today and we have to make sure we have enough nurses in the ER, but what are we going to have to deal with after COVID? And in my strategic part of the day, I kept thinking, I'm really worried about burnout. I'm really worried about these folks just doing a mic drop and say, I'm out of here
I can't do it
because
anymore.
I cannot do it anymore. And what would happen is we would tease them. There would be a surge and then it would get better. And they're like, oh, thank goodness we're through this. And then guess what? We'd have another surge again and they're like, I'm done. And then we'd lose 10 or 15 nurses.
Wow.
And then it would get better. And then everybody would kind of calm and then we'd hit another surge and we'd lose more. So great question. The first thing that I tell all our leaders is just like with anything else, you have to own it. You have to be transparent and you have to say, guys, this is real. I get it. And I see it in you. We have to all just be honest with each other that we're going through this. And, you know, I have VP level leaders that are going through burnout and you know, COVID was top of mind and 24/7, 365 for 2 years now. We have to be honest with each other that I personally have suffered from the burnout of COVID because you couldn't turn it off.
Yes.
There was something 24/7 coming at you, something new. And we have to be honest with each other. So when we all realize that we're in the same boats and there may be different severity of it for people, but you know, I've had a lot of people that say, wow, thank you for saying that. Thank you for being honest that you have it too.
Right.
And then I don't feel like I'm weak.
Like there's something wrong with me, or it's just me.
Yeah. Or I don't know what it is, but I just don't feel like I get the same pleasure out of my job that I used to. And you know, physicians are going through this. We're concerned about them with all the computer time, the documentation that they have to do. So we've been focused on physician burnout and the potential for us to have a physician shortage. Now in the immediate, it's nursing, it's anybody bedside, it's respiratory therapists. And I think the best thing that we can do is we own it and we say, look, this is real. I'm experiencing it. You try to be a vulnerable leader.
Yeah.
And you say, look, if anybody else is, let's talk about this. So we have an employee assistance program within the system that we refer some of our folks to make sure that, you know, if you had a heart problem, I wouldn't just say, hey, I'll deal with it. And I'd send you to the heart specialist.
Right.
So when you have a burnout problem, you almost have to peel back all the layers on each individual and really offer them truly professional help.
Yeah, resources.
And sometimes it's a therapist. Sometimes it's all the way up to a psychiatrist. Sometimes there's some underlying stuff that got uncovered through this very, very traumatic time that none of us had ever been through in healthcare, at least in our lifetime.
Right.
And so it's as serious as, you know, is this, you know, only burnout that probably a therapist can get you through? Or is this uncovering something else that was brewing in there, a depression or an anxiety problem that
Did it just ignite something else?
COVID exacerbated it, or the trauma from it, the unknown of it, you know, and I've had a lot of patients that were very isolated. You know, we're very social creatures and they went home and stayed by themselves. I had a patient that we were probably 6 months into COVID at that point. And she came in and saw me and said, this is the first time I've seen another human being or been out of my house in 6 months.
Oh my gosh.
And I thought my heart broke for her. She was elderly and I thought how isolating and it was just, you know, so we've all been through this, but we all have to be honest and not act tough and tear the barrier down and say, look, we're all struggling here. We're all broken. We all have an ism of something. And we all need to help each other out, get through it. So, you know, it's about, you know, kind of asking and inquiring, hey, you know, you seem down today, you okay? And, you know, plugging people in and letting them know that that's okay because we're all struggling through COVID.
Yes.
I mean, I don't know of one person that wasn't affected by COVID, whether it be isolation, whether it be just their change, whether it be a financial struggle. So in healthcare, we're just being very honest with each other, transparent with each other, and we're not putting any stigma on asking for help. And plugging them into, you know, somebody professionally to let them know that there's help out there.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
And I think What I just respect and appreciate about you so much is that you are very much kind of, breaking stereotypes about what it is to be a CEO or what it is to be a physician. That, hey, I'm not saying just because I'm a whatever title that I'm not struggling with this
Absolutely.
too, and it's impacting me. I'm not, Teflon from all of this. I'm like you.
Right.
And that builds that connection right off the bat with someone and helps them to not feel so alone and isolated in that situation, which is really important.
Yeah, and they saw that, I had the credibility to run and help them out on the front lines and mask and gown up. So they know that you can be tough when you need to be. It's not like I hid back in an office and never came out and saw anybody and just said, yeah, I'm really affected too. They saw it in real time and they knew that I was there. So, they knew that I had the toughness to make it through, but they also knew that I wasn't fake and acting like, oh, no, I'm fine. What's COVID? That's no big deal.
Let's talk about the numbers.
Yeah, exactly. You're right. You have to own it and you have to ask all the time, is everybody doing okay? Is everybody checking on their coworkers? For those folks that equate, toughness with hiding and stuffing your emotional garbage bag full, as a physician, I would tell them, just be careful because that comes out at some point.
Oh yeah.
And sometimes it's, you can only stuff that thing
that
full
bag can only hold so much.
So sometimes if you just, it's very therapeutic to sit down and say, it looks like you're struggling. I'm struggling too. What are you doing? Are you exercising? Are you meditating? Are you going through a counseling? What are you doing? And sometimes it's just to be heard and to connect with those people on that level. Sometimes that's helpful.
Yeah.
Just to have an outlet with somebody to say, what a great guy. He seems like he's really struggling too, but we're talking with each other at least.
Well, and it's someone that cares. And I think you're in an environment where you have a lot of people who care about other people. And so that adds, I think, to all of this emotional trauma that they genuinely care about their patients. And so this is not, a transactional process. There's a lot of heart involved in it. And so, that's that extra element or that extra layer of it to say, I'm not okay. This is not, this is impacting me greatly.
Yeah.
Wow. All right. Let's talk about your new role at UHC because I'm very excited for you, like I said, coming back home and, what does this role mean to you, mean for you? What are your hopes for the future with it?
Yeah, so this was one of those points that, again, all leaders probably go through that, what does success mean to you as a leader? And what ultimate goals do you have? And for me, it was all about coming back home, and it was all about, it means the world to me because, the first day that I went back into United Hospital Center where my mom worked for probably 30 years, the volunteer at the front desk was an office worker at Lincoln High School.
Oh, my goodness.
She was the assistant to the principal, Carol Gaynor, and just came up and hugged me.
Aww.
And, that's when it hit home to me.
Yeah.
That a lot of messages to unwrap there. But the message that we talked about in my bio that, a kid that grew up in Lumberport, if I can do it, anybody can. But the other message is, a lot of us have the opportunity to leave and go elsewhere. And, like my brother lives in the southernmost city of West Virginia, Charlotte, North Carolina. He moved away a long time ago. There's a lot of
West Virginians in that town.
There are. Believe me, every time I go down and visit and I wear something West Virginia, they're like, hey, I'm from Beckley. And I don't fault those people for doing it, but the message for the people that are here is that, find a way to stay and build in your community and work in your community and give back to the community. And I've been so blessed in my career to be helped by so many wonderful people. And, even the teachers back in high school and the people in the community, that what better way to come back and give back to the people that gave so much to me.
Yeah.
And, there's titles and there's monetary, but really when it comes down to it, it's running into those people at Walmart or Target and or a sporting event, and being able to say, I got you the best cardiologist I could find, and they're going to make your heart better, or we've got great cancer doctors here, and they're going to get you through whatever. I mean, just being able to do that for the community, it means everything. I mean, I love doing it in the other communities where I worked, but getting the ability to come back and doing it in our community, I can't even put a price tag on that, and how much it makes me want to be better for the next day. It's the most rewarding thing I could ever do in any role.
Well, and it's inspiring because it's really, coming to the point of this was the community that took care of you growing up, and now you're in a position to turn around and take care of the community, which I just think is so neat to see how it comes around.
No, that's what excited me the most when I had conversations with, Albert Wright, the CEO of the health system, what my long-term plan was. And, that could have gone a lot of different directions. And, I respected him as a leader and a mentor. He's a great visionary, great with people, and is very honest. And we try to take a little bit from everybody. And I know folks watching your show, hopefully will take a little bit from everybody on here. Everybody that we've interacted with and the leaders we've worked with, you try to take a little bit of what they do. And I think one of the things that I liked the most about Albert is what he said he was going to do, he would follow through with. And so there was that trust there that was just unwavering. And, a lot of that was about previous conversations about, what I would want my career path to look like. And it just always seemed like it was leading me back towards UHC. And I told him that the ultimate goal is when, the CEO retires, I would like to be considered for that job. And he stayed true to his word. And, I met with the board down there and ended up getting their vote of confidence as well, which was very humbling. But, that community, since I've left, has grown. And, they have a jewel of a hospital in that community. And I know that giving the keys to somebody new is something that they take very seriously. And I know there's a lot of responsibility with that, but I think at the end of the day, just getting up and being able to give back to the community that, again, so many people gave me rides to sporting events and baseball practices and paid for my lunch at certain places. It's just, that's immeasurable, the amount of satisfaction and gratification you get from going back and helping them.
Yeah. Going for strategic just for a moment, if you kind of fast forward, of course, I never want you to leave that hospital, but thinking about if you transition somewhere after that, what would you want your legacy to be for your time at UHC?
I love that you ask about legacy because I talk about legacy a lot. So my legacy at UHC, I want to, the long-term effect there and the culture is always putting the patient and the community first. So, as a physician and that leads a healthcare organization, you can't measure what it means for people to walk into a building and they're scared to death, whether it's they're getting a test or having a surgery, for somebody to be met with warmth and kindness and compassion. And are you looking for someplace? Let me show you where that is. And that can be anybody. That can be the volunteer at the front desk. That can be, one of the folks that work in environmental services. That can be, we have a painter there that's very talkative and stopped me in the hall. We had a great conversation the other day. It can be that person. And I remember, my mom, who was a nurse and had worked at 8 different hospitals, and she came to one of my hospitals one time and said, "This hospital has a warmth that I've not felt in many other hospitals." And it ended up, I said, well, who really stood out there? And it was one of our environmental service workers there.
Wow.
Yes. And then again, in true typical West Virginia fashion, fast forward, and this environmental service person used to always talk about her son, Matt. And I've reconnected with Matt and found out that he's running our operating room at United Hospital Center.
No way.
And he's got the best DNA that I could ever, because this person outworked, out-hustled everybody, but did it in such a way that she constantly made an impact. Every room that she would go into, she had something kind and just perfect to say to that patient to put their mind at ease, to calm them down. My mom happened to be one of them, and she said, no, it was Young that came in, and she was fantastic. You know, she was just the best person ever. So
that's amazing.
Yeah.
I love that connection too, because you're talking about two different areas,
Absolutely.
you know, within West Virginia and the connection there.
And again, the other leadership, you know, kind of pearl there is that you never know, you know, always be kind and compassionate on the way up.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I can give you so many stories in my career where somebody said, oh, that Dave Hess, you know, you'll like him. And it was somebody that I worked with early on in my career and really respected and would ask for input and just treated them the right way. Yeah. And then, you know, it comes full circle.
It absolutely does. And
Always.
Regardless of where you go, I remember, I think I was in high school and they brought in a motivational speaker, but I remember the message was, you know, when you're climbing up the top, you know, it gets pretty steep up there. And are you going to have a safety net of people if you fall who will be there to catch you, or are you just going to come crashing down? And it was all about, you know, how do you treat people regardless of where you go and what your definition of success is? You know, do you have that safety net behind you, which I think I have not heard anyone say anything but amazing things about you, which was one of the reasons. Yeah, I was so excited to talk to you because again, you do have already a reputation and a legacy that you've built even in this area. Mm-hmm. And so I think you're just going to be able to come in and, you know, keep going with it, which is exciting.
Yeah. One of my favorite movies, for whatever reason, I like sports, but you and I had talked about, one of my favorite movies is Moneyball.
Yeah.
And in Moneyball, you know, the character who's an analyst and really isn't much of a business person per se. But he figured out a way to win that nobody else was paying attention to. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying in hospital that nobody's paying attention to it, but I remember my first meeting as a CEO, my leadership meeting, you know, I played a clip from Moneyball and said, you know, I've figured out how to win in medicine. Mm-hmm. And it goes back to, you know, we were in financial trouble and I was trying to get people to trust me.
Right.
And, you know, the secret sauce in medicine is that, you know, and it goes back to the adage, people will always remember how you make them feel.
Yes. Yes.
Right? So that's any business.
Not necessarily even what you say, but how you make them feel. Yep.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So especially in healthcare. So especially when you're at your worst or at your most fearful, you know, you've got that bad, you know, reading on a mammogram or whatever, and you're coming back in for a follow-up. People always remember how you make them feel. So if we create an organization, we create a hospital, we create a health system that makes people feel a certain way and makes people feel respected, makes people feel welcomed and comforted, we win. Mm-hmm. And they really bought into that. I said, look, you know, we're not the New York Yankees because, again, that hospital is financially struggling.
Right.
And we're the Oakland Athletics. Mm-hmm. In that movie, the Oakland Athletics didn't have any money and they had to make a team out of people that just had good value. And so, you know, the Jonah Hill character found people with good value. Mm-hmm. And the people with good value in any business, really, but certainly in healthcare, are the ones that can really create that positive emotion in people and make them feel warm and comforted. And that's how that hospital truly pulled out of financial disarray. We started grabbing market share in a very competitive market in northern West Virginia. There were 5 hospitals in a 35-mile radius when I started. Wow. People started coming to our hospital because they felt that warmth. They felt that welcoming. They said, wow, people there are so nice and it's easy to get in and out. And you know, so then what happens is like people attract like people. Yeah. Right? So then people are like, hey, I want to go down there and work because those people seem happy. It was because we were recruiting those people that say, this person gets it.
That's amazing.
You know, I want to work in that organization that treat people the right way and respect people. And because at the end of the day, you know, you want to lay your head on the pillow and say, I did the best I could for whether it's your customer, whether it's your patient. And I think the people that at our organization do feel that way.
Wow. And not that I want to go to the hospital anywhere,
please don't.
But if I did, that's the kind of hospital I'd want to go to because that's, you know, really feeling taken care of in all, you know, all the ways.
It is.
Amazing. So I think what's so interesting to me about you is that you have a really great balance of kind of the head and the heart. And I'm curious about, to me, that makes you a very successful leader. So I would love to hear your thoughts and advice for other leaders, what pearls of wisdom that you would share in addition to what you've shared so far, but anything that we've kind of maybe not touched upon yet that you feel like has led to your success that you could share with others.
So, again, I've not seen this anywhere in leadership. So I know you've asked other folks what their definition of leadership is. Mine's a little different. Not much, but it's a little different. And, I think it speaks to the head and the heart. And it also speaks to, I think, my background as a physician. A lot of people think the best physician is the person that gives the right medicine or gives, but my definition of a physician and kind of it rolls into a leader is, my definition of leadership is making people better. So then you're like, what is that? And it can have 17 different layers, but it's the same way with a physician. Sometimes making people better isn't curing them. Sometimes it's just listening to people. Sometimes it's letting them feel heard. Sometimes it's getting them through a tough time. Sometimes it is giving them medicine. So for leadership, it's about making people better around you. So that's not a title thing. That's not, so everybody can be a leader. And I know, Jim Matuga, one of our mutual friends, talks a lot about leading yourself.
Yes.
So, it is about making yourself better too when you're leading yourself. But so, when people ask me, who one of the best leaders are of our time, I surprise them many times. And it goes along with a lot of my sports analogies in that Michael Jordan was one of the best leaders in our time.
Ooh, I like that.
So think about it. So we have these conversations all the time. Who was the best NBA player? The reason I think Michael Jordan was an incredible leader and Tom Brady's kind of the same way is that they make everybody around them better by being on the field, on the court with them. And maybe that's leading by example. Maybe that's motivating them. Maybe that's inspiring them. I always say that, average leaders can tell people what to do and good leaders can motivate people what to do, but great leaders inspire people on what to do. And I think that's when you look at some of the folks that I think are truly great leaders, they're always making people around them better. And a lot of times that's investing in people. A lot of times that's pausing and stopping and saying, "Are you okay?" So it's I get that there's people that feel like it's influence or so it does bleed over a little bit into, but just kind of a generic definition of leadership that I have is just making people better. And so a lot of people can be leaders and a lot of people can make people better, but it's also interesting that there's not a success label on that either. So it's not like it's not an if-then statement, and the end result doesn't always have to be success. Sometimes you can be a great leader and things don't work out, but you still are making people better around you or making yourself better. So pearls of wisdom. As I think about it, there's a leadership part to it. There's kind of an entrepreneurial part. Sometimes, we get, I talk a lot about being transparent. I think we get frozen a little bit in appearances and how leaders are supposed to appear or, so I would say be open and honest and transparent like we've talked a lot about. And with that is getting started, because I see a lot of leaders that are frozen in how something's going to come across or how they need to present it, or do they need to do a PowerPoint for this meeting? And I say, look, just get going, jump in and get it started. And you can massage and change your message or your product as you go. Now, that doesn't mean don't do your homework and do something sloppy, but
don't get into that analysis paralysis where you don't do anything.
And that's what I say a lot is that you're kind of frozen in sometimes, to your point before, people want you to be honest and they want to know where they stand and everything. And sometimes in the absence of of no knowledge, they're going to put something in there and assume the worst.
I was going to say, it's never better than what their real story is.
Exactly. So, a lot of leaders are like, okay, I'm going to set a meeting every hour, every 2 weeks with this group. And I'm like, but you're missing that daily interaction that you need to be a leader too. So you don't have to have a formal meeting a lot of times. Maybe it's a quick huddle, and maybe, and I think we get too caught up with, things having to happen a certain way, and sometimes it's, they read a certain leadership book and they think, no, this person recommends that every 2 hours I bring everybody in a room and we all sit around and we each take our turn and we talk, and I say, no, you'll develop your own style. And sometimes you pivot a little bit and sometimes you'll change it. And I've done that a lot in my career. And but just get going on it, because that way too they see you struggle a little bit and you don't get it perfect. And I think that's another great message to everybody, is that I'm not perfect and I'm going to struggle, but we're in it together, and I'm going to take your feedback on how to make it better. So it's kind of like with entrepreneurs, when you got an idea, sometimes you just got to jump in and get started a little bit. And maybe I'm faulted for jumping in too quickly, too much. I want to get going, and not do my due diligence enough. But I surround myself with people that are those critical thinkers and the folks that do a lot of due diligence, and they're the hesitant, wait for a second, let me get you there. So again, another pearl is, if you are one person out, you got to surround yourself with people that aren't like you exactly, and certainly that won't say yes to everything, but surrounding yourself around that table with people of different backgrounds and certainly different leadership styles.
Ooh, that's big, because I have seen a lot of times leaders do end up surrounding themselves with people who are either like them or won't challenge them. And, and they may even say, I want you to tell me if you disagree.
Absolutely.
And, but don't really mean it. And it can be hard, because if you surround yourself with people who maybe aren't like you, they can sometimes be a little more challenging to deal with, right?
Yeah.
Everybody wants to be told, sure, your idea's great. Let's run with it, instead
Sounded
of
just like my idea, I was going to say.
Perfect. Let's go do it. And, and not hold you back or not tell you no. But at the same time, are you really being challenged, and are you really getting to the best result in the end if you are surrounding yourself with those kind of people? But that takes, I think, a good bit of humility and being able to kind of and we all have ego, but putting our ego in check to say, you know what? I may not have all of the answers here, but I'm going to surround myself with, a team of people where we can work together to come up with that.
No, I think, Simon Sinek talks a lot about trust in an organization and creating trust. And I think it comes down to that. Yeah. That, you've created a culture where they can speak up and you're actually going to listen, like you said, and not just say, but you've got to trust each other and trust the organization and trust the leadership team or whatever team you're on to work through it, be honest. Never make it personal, make it about ideas and products. And, I think that, if anything, I've probably been guilty of letting those awkward, difficult moments last a little bit too long in meetings because I want to see where it goes.
I think it's smart. I don't think you would let it go too long.
And it's tough because everybody's looking at me like, shut this down now, because it really gets them out of their comfort zone. And then I just let this awkward, dramatic pause happen. And what I'm doing is allowing, maybe it's the two people that have differing opinions, come to some commonality or make a statement about the other person that, the old adage, we need to really listen to hear people, not just to respond and reply. It's to allow them to think about what the other person said, and not just me say, okay, well, let's put that on for another meeting and we'll do a one-off on that one in a sidebar. It's letting that get played out and work, because you got to create the trust in an organization to say, okay, you two are going to differ and I'm not going to shut it down. No. Because I value what you're both saying. And it's not that either of you are wrong. It's just that we need to have a compromise or whatever. And but that's really, really tough.
It is.
To let those awkward conversations where somebody's under somebody else's skin and as long as they keep it professional, allowing that static to happen. Yeah. Because that's the growth in the organization.
Yes, that when you're pushing people out of their comfort zone, that's when they grow and that's when they learn.
And the organization does, because it's not that just, one-minded, it's all going to flow
Think
right.
tank.
Yeah, right. It's all going to be in the middle of the fairway, and we're all just going to have these very vanilla ideas that nobody else challenged each other. And, it's tough. And a lot of times there's the finance folks in on it, and we know this is the best thing to do, but we can't afford it, or how are we going to afford it? And you got to let those things play out, because if you jump in too soon, right, then you cut somebody off, or you cut the compromise out, or you cut that solution that may be there between both of them. And so I think that, I don't know if it's because, I've been in a lot of difficult and awkward conversations as a physician, that I'm okay letting that play out a little bit.
Yeah, I was curious, how do you do that? Because especially if you are more of an action-oriented, let's go kind of guy, that's got to be hard for you personally, just kind of hold back.
It's that intentional piece again.
Yeah.
Where I want to jump in and say, I know how to fix this.
Yeah.
But you can't, because your team needs this to happen.
Yeah.
It's been brewing for a while, or whatever.
Yeah.
And you knew this point was coming, and you kind of knew which way you were leaning, but for the team to grow and overcome some of the barriers that they've had up, or that they've been siloed off on, and you're trying to connect them and build that bridge. This needs to happen. This conversation has been needing to happen for a while.
Yes.
This person's going this way, this person's mad at them, and they're going the other way, and this, and to let that play out when you're that jump on it person is very difficult. But literally the voice in my head is telling me, don't say anything. Let this play out. And it's really, really hard.
It is hard.
Because everybody's looking at you like you're the final say. You're the judge.
Step in.
You
do something.
slam the gavel and make it happen.
Tell that person
right
they're wrong and
exactly,
I'm right.
Exactly. And it's not, and I always tell, it's not about somebody being right or wrong, but that's just that human nature of it.
Yes.
Is that I am so right. I can't believe everybody else in this room can't see it, especially the CEO. Tell him to end this right now. But again, so many other great things are happening there that are allowing them to work through those situations, that I just want to see how they play out.
Wow. And there's so much learning that's happening.
Absolutely.
Because you're giving that space for people to start listening to, even if they're not the two that are engaged. I'm sure there's other people in the room that are watching, like with popcorn.
Oh, yeah.
What's going to happen next?
Glad it's not me.
Exactly. But they're getting to learn from someone else's perspective, or even just their thought process on how they approach things.
Yeah. No, you always are learning. I mean, again, we go back to this lifelong yearning for learning. I mean, every meeting that we have, I tell everybody, we got to make sure we're learning from each other, or from somebody else's style, or how they're doing something, or how they presented their Excel spreadsheet. I mean, we should always be taking away something from everything. But for your organization to continuously grow and allow those conversations to happen is really, really hard. And again, especially when we're all under a time crunch, it's hard to let some of those conversations play out, because you just want to end them and say, we got to move on. We got other stuff to do. But, again, investing in your people and trying to make your people better every day, those things have to happen. Yeah. Because again, a lot of times I'll pull them by after the side and say, I want you to understand, I recognize how awkward that was, but I've just seen some of the tension going on between you and John, and I just felt like that needed to play out. You needed to say your piece, he needed to say his piece. Then we come together as a leadership team and we move forward. Yeah. Now, hopefully that can be in the rear view and you guys can work together. And, and a lot of times it's, I never saw it that way, until John, raised his voice and said, I'm under intense time crunches over here. He never thought about it that way. And you're like, well, I'm glad that worked out. Yeah. Sometimes they do. And you're better for it moving forward. But, that's something that I don't know why I don't know that I enjoy them, but I'm okay with those happening. Yeah. And I think it's just because, I've had so many difficult conversations, in my life that, that everybody are like, whew, boy, that was bad. And I'm like, that was not one of the worst ones I've had this week. Yeah,
I've had worse. But I think you're probably, you've gotten a benefit or a payoff from it. There's
absolutely.
a reward in it, and you know what it is, even if they can't see it at the time, they're getting a benefit from it too.
Absolutely.
Although I do have to ask about, when I think about learning, I think a lot of times about mistakes and failure. And I think in a healthcare setting, that's a very different context.
It is.
When I used to do payroll and I'd mess something up, the CFO would be like, "That's okay, you're not a neurosurgeon.
Right.
That the bad's gonna happen here.
Right.
We'll fix that." The amount of pressure I would assume people in a healthcare setting put on themselves around mistakes. I mean, how does that show up in terms of encouraging learning, but also recognizing sometimes, not all mistakes, but sometimes there can be quite a cost with a mistake.
Absolutely.
So how does that show up in your environment?
It's different than anywhere else, and it goes back to that culture of trust.
Yeah.
And I think the ability for us to I think that all plays into burnout, because you're right. We're under an intense pressure now to have what we call zero harm events, meaning that we have to be perfect, and we're striving towards perfection.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of people say that they're, we want to be perfect, but in healthcare, you're right. It means different. It means that anything preventable or anything that you could have done, we have to get right 100% of the time. And I think the burden and the mental stress and anguish that's accompanying that does again play into this burnout, and does play into the challenge that we have keeping a mentally and physically healthy workforce. So how we handle it is that we constantly educate our staff about, what are the goals? When we talk about we want to have zero harm events, what does that mean? We want to make sure that nobody gets a blood clot laying in bed. We want to make sure that nobody gets a pressure ulcer from laying in bed too much. You got to make sure you identify the goals, so we're all speaking the same language, going back to an earlier point. So we communicate the goals and make sure everybody knows what they are. And then, again, we try to be as transparent as we can with each other about, we understand that everybody's human, and
Sure.
we're just like leadership. We're on this journey to try to get to perfection and zero harm. But there is this overwhelming specter of the medical legal piece to it.
Yeah.
And we used to think that, the hospital would be the only one on the hook. And then a recent case at Vanderbilt blew that out of the water, where a nurse actually got convicted for a harm event. So there's a lot of details in that case that are probably not like all the other typical issues that happen in a hospital, but it's top of mind for every healthcare worker.
Absolutely.
That you have to be perfect and you don't want to mess up. Because again, it would be like, every childhood dream, whether it would be getting to go on a rocket ship, getting to play in the Super Bowl, right before you walk out of the tunnel to go on the football field, or right as you're going up to the ramp to fly in the rocket ship, somebody saying, no, you can't do that anymore.
Yeah.
A lot of these nurses and a lot of these, their lifelong passion is they all have servant hearts and they want to help others. And then all of a sudden they think that what they were put on the earth to do, they screwed up and caused harm to somebody. And it's devastating emotionally and mentally for them. So, we have to be very cognizant of the pressure that they're under.
Right.
And what we end up doing is we end up helping them with technology guardrails around them. And we create ways that these medication errors won't happen.
Yeah.
They have to get an override to do certain things. They have to grab a buddy and double check them on other things. So we understand that people are human and people get tired and people transpose numbers and but I think that's one way that when we make this major investment in technology, we do try to protect our employees, because we know not everybody's perfect.
Sure.
But if you're having a bad moment or a bad day and you go to punch in a medication, it's going to say, wait, are you sure you want it? And they're going to be like, yeah, I'm sure I want it. And it's going to say, are you really, really sure you want it? And you go get your friend, so she has to verify that that's what you want.
Yeah.
That's what our organization has been good at, putting these double check systems and these safety nets in place, so that it all doesn't fall on them. And I think that's the greatest thing about technology is, like anything, it's great when it's working well.
Yeah.
And especially in healthcare, we've made such a major investment in the technology piece. And that's not just so patients can get their labs on their phone. It's so that our nurses and employees can work in a safe environment, that they know there's some safeguards there so they don't make these mistakes.
Oh, that's amazing. And again, it feels like they have more support, that they're just
absolutely.
not on their own trying to be perfect when we all know it's not realistic,
Right.
to expect that.
And that's been our message after this case happened at Vanderbilt. We had a lot of people that said, hey, wait a minute, what are we doing here?
Yeah.
The message is, when we put these new technological advances in place, is to protect you. And it's because we're investing this money to protect you. And sometimes it's a hassle because, you get a seasoned veteran nurse that say, yes, I definitely want this medicine. They got to do it 2 or 3 times. But it's really to protect everybody, because not everybody's that seasoned veteran.
Right.
We've got a lot of new people that have entered the workforce, and maybe they don't know that. So we've got to put it in place for everybody and put the safeguards in place. But I think we do a good job at that. And we message to them that, look, this is for you. This is for your benefit. This is for your protection. We get it. Sometimes it's an extra step. But at the end of the day, you're going to feel safe that we value you enough to put these safeguards in place and make this investment.
Wow. And you're explaining the why to them. And it's not just about, here's how we're trying to protect ourselves. This is we're looking out for you. You
got to lead with the why, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Always.
Love that.
Yes.
Well, I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge that since you are a physician, I'm always curious about wellness as it relates to being in a leadership role. And so, I would love to hear your perspective, thoughts on what leaders can do to keep themselves in a better state of well-being so that they can be fit to serve for others.
And that's hard because you're always wanting to do for others. You're always wanting to give. And again, we only have so much of that that we can do. And if you're emptying your emotional glass during the day for everybody else, there's nothing left for you. There's nothing left for your family. It's very difficult. And again, we're all on that journey. I can't say that I'm perfect. What I do like to do, though, is with our leaders, there's none of that, what I call PTO guilt. And honestly, I love that as a system, we've kind of embraced what we kind of call mental health days. And, we know that, leadership is 24/7, 365 job. But we also know that that's not sustainable long term if you want to be a good or a great leader. I'm always checking in with my leadership team and encourage them to take a long weekend or some time off and to really find something outside of work that really, drives them to decompress and get rid of some of the emotional garbage that has built up during the week. For myself personally, I think, for my bio, it's finding those outside things and making sure I commit to them. Yeah. And, for a while I was in a band, and then unfortunately, life happens and I had to, kind of get out of the band a little bit. But for me, it's family and kids and sports and exercise. And you just got to make an intentional commitment to make sure that you're feeling fulfilled outside of work. Yeah. And, for me, it's, making sure that, I take a Friday off every now and then and get a long weekend in and spend it with the family and try to be as physically active as you possibly can during all that and making sure you commit some time to that. And, and honestly, it's, in your off time, it's surrounding yourself with people that fill your cup up. Yeah. And however that is. It's funny, and we all probably do it in our younger days, but, I still run into people in leadership roles that, hey, how was your weekend? Oh, boy, I'm still tired. We were out till 4 a.m. and I ran into this guy and, and I'm like, okay, and I worry about people that, don't have people that are filling them up on the weekends or when they're not at work and stealing from their emotional cup. And, again, I don't, involve myself in that, but I just always make sure that, the work drains a lot of your emotional cup.
Yes.
And I just always make sure when I'm outside of work that, I want to still fill other people's cup up, but you want to make sure that you're not having a bunch of people there that really drain from your emotional
draining
cup.
that. Absolutely. Or, you want to look for healthy outlets,
Absolutely.
not, unhealthy, which there's many options there.
Many options. Many options.
Too many options.
Yes. We've all been there.
Yeah.
But it's that sustaining healthy options outside of work.
Yeah.
Is important for me to focus on and make sure my team knows that it's okay.
Yeah.
And I think setting that tone and that culture of, hey, I'm happy that you're taking this Friday off. I'm happy that you're taking that Monday off, because we have been going really, really hard. And take that time off for yourself.
Well, and that's leading by example too, in terms
absolutely.
of acknowledging that and then doing it yourself as well.
Yeah.
Wow, you have been very gracious with your time, and I appreciate it.
I appreciate being here. This has been wonderful. You're fantastic.
Oh, thank you.
You have a great way of drawing out the best out of people. Love your video podcast.
Thank you.
We'll continue to watch them.
Yes.
And I'm happy to have been asked to come.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. Anything we've left on the table that we didn't cover that you want to get out there?
No, you're fantastic. And keep up the great work with what you're doing.
You too. I'm very excited. We're going to, if you will, I know I took a lot of time today, but we can get you back later once you've been settled into your new role and hear how it's going, because I think that would be really cool.
Would love that.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right. Well, can we do the lightning round before
yes. If I got left out of the lightning round, I would be upset. I love the lightning round.
I can't not do the lightning round with you.
Love the lightning round.
Okay.
It's a little, I'm like Jim, I'm a little nervous.
Everybody gets nervous about the lightning round. Okay. All right. 1 minute.
Okay.
It's a standard questions. 1 minute to answer as many as you can. Okay.
Yes.
On your mark, get set, go. What season best fits your personality?
Fall.
Okay. What's your most used emoji in text?
Smiley face.
Okay. What book, song, movie, podcast has had the greatest impact on your life?
Let me say, I got to go Star Wars. I'm a Star Wars guy.
Star Wars.
Nerd.
I think you'll get a lot of fans out of that. What's something about you that surprises people when they first hear it?
That I was a lead singer in a band.
Yeah, I love that. Fill in the blank. I spend too much money on...
Spend too much money on probably food and eating out.
Same. What celebrity would you want to play you in a movie?
I think Matthew McConaughey would make a good
option.
one. Yeah.
Good option. All right. Favorite room in your house?
Favorite room is probably our family room.
Yeah. Good one. Okay. If you catch me by the fridge at night, I'm probably sneaking what?
Probably a Diet Dr. Pepper.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right, very good. You made it the farthest.
I know. I'm excited.
You were practicing,
I was
right?
like, those guys have to move a little bit. And I got hung up on, I didn't practice the questions, but I got hung up on one, and I wanted to get as many as possible.
I know you got that competitive streak.
I know, yeah.
This does not surprise me at all. All right.
It's been a joy
well
to be
done.
here. Thank you so much.
Thank
really
you so
it.
much. I appreciate it. We'll have you back.
Please do.
All right.
I love it.
Very good. That's all the time we have today, folks. Until next time, shine bright, everyone.